Usually the lectures are great, but I have found the question answer sessions in the retreat, they are far more useful, far more lively also. So, and you saw already how nicely he presents the ideas, even in the lectures. So in the question answers, it will be still better. So let us go ahead.
Thank you, Swamiji. What's anahata sound, the primordial sound? Sound needs a medium to travel. What's the medium through which it travels? Space is a vacuum. A lot of it is anyway. Yes, exactly. And that's what I was mentioning before, where the idea that the universe is created out of sound is really a metaphor for the universe is created out of vibrations. And Om is the symbol of that vibration, and to us we use it as an audible sound and sound in air, but you're correct that there isn't any physical sound, but it gets translated into the physical medium of sound, and we experience that as that anahata sound, that primordial sound. So when that energy of vibration that's fundamental to the universe gets translated into a form that we can experience, we experience it as sound. So I hope that explains the difficulty here, because you're correct that there isn't any medium for the anahata to travel through. It is empty space. There isn't any material medium there. But the subtle vibrations, this is a vibration on the causal level. You could say that this is the causal equivalent of what we experience as sound in our physical gross level.
If everything's vibrations, does the vacuum, is that composed of vibrations?
Oh, good question.
Well, just what he was telling, a little more comment on that it is the very word anahata explains that there is no necessity of any medium, because it is not produced by striking two things. It is already pervading everything. When we tune our minds to it, we hear it. It doesn't travel because it is all pervading. It is the traveling is when something is here but not there, then it travels from here to there. But anahata, it is unstruck sound. It is pervading everything, and so no need for it to travel, and therefore no need for any medium either. Same holds for your vibrations also. Everything is vibrations when it comes, when it is struck. Then they are the struck vibrations. Otherwise it is not a vibration. It is a perception without the division between subject and object. So there is no vibration, but all vibrations come from there. It sources all vibrations. Any comment on that?
One question I have.
Yeah, please.
Let me just address this thing for a moment. In that there are some quantum physicists that talk about random fluctuations of emptiness, of empty space. And through the uncertainty principle, there's this idea that things can spontaneously manifest out of the empty space. But they will do that in pairs of opposites that will then tend to annihilate each other as well. So it's not a very long-lasting creation, but there is that idea. And then there's one reconciliation of what's called the double slit experiment in physics, where If you shine light through two very narrow slits close together, they create a diffraction pattern indicating they're going through as waves. But if you do the experiment where you send photons through one at a time, you still get that effect. And it's like, how can you get an interference pattern if the photons are going through one at a time? Well, it's because they're probability waves, and there really isn't any going from here to there. As Swamiji said, they don't have to go anywhere. They're not really traveling. And in that sense, light is the same way. At the level of Brahman, the causal level, there isn't any separation in space-time, as we talked about Einstein's equation. The separation in space-time between the event of the light leaving the photon emitter and the light landing on the screen behind is zero, and there isn't any separation, and there isn't any going from here to there. But the way the universe appears to us is that it has to go from here to there because it appears separated in space and time, and then you get this dilemma as how did it get there? Let's see. Okay, so
but through the vacuum, the electromagnetic radiation and the radio waves, they can travel. But the sound, the audible sound, is not able to do that. So I'm thinking, is the anahata sound, could it be a form of electromagnetic radiation type of wave that eventually comes to us and then transforms into audible?
I don't think of it in physical terms at all. I think it's a totally different level of existence. It's the causal level. So it doesn't have to have a physical component to it. Oh, is something I probably won't be able to answer. Can you please explain your perspective on the Higgs boson and the possibility of discovery of a life particle? Yeah, I'm not an expert on particle physics, but apparently they're trying to define this Higgs boson, and sometimes they call it the God particle, and they think that this is somehow going to be connected to some fundamental property of the universe. And so far they haven't been able to find it. But I'm afraid I don't know the details well enough to really comment on it very well, so I'll have to brush up on that. Get a good answer for later. But there are quite a few problems with the standard model. It predicts that protons will decay, and they haven't been able to find that. They've had to invent the inflationary model, and there isn't any reason for it except that it has to do it in order to get rid of antimatter. And then they had to invent dark energy and dark matter to explain the seemingly peculiar nature of the way it seems like there's more matter in the universe, there's more gravitational attraction on things than we can visibly see, and so forth. So there are quite a few problems with the model and the way they're having to patch it up. It's kind of reminds you of the way they were patching up the circles model, where the orbits of Mars was first just a circle, and then it was a circle on top of a circle, and then it was little circles on top of little circles on top of little circle. And pretty soon you say, this is getting more complicated than the model's worth, and you have to throw it out and start over again. And I have a feeling it's going to get to that. There's, by the way, a Hindu-born scientist, Narlikar, who feels the same way. He says that we're having to patch this up too many times here. We may need to look at a different model. Do you think God wanted to share, and that is why He created us? What could be the reason? Is it just to be? Well, this is sort of the unanswerable question, isn't it? As Sri Ramakrishna said, that once you, and Vivekananda, once you're in samadhi, the questions disappear, and when you're on this side, you can't put the answers into words. So you're kind of stuck. And we talk about things from our perspective within this realm of duality, and we talk in symbols and analogies that all have to do with things in space and time. But if the reality is beyond space and time, then those things are really not very accurate. And so these questions, I find it very interesting that when you look at dreams, we don't know why we dream either. And yet we do dream, and if you prevent people from dreaming, it has ill effects on them. So it seems to be like that. It seems like Brahman has this ability to create or manifest an apparent universe, and it does, but why it does we really can't answer. It just does, just the way we seem to have to dream even though we don't quite know why we do it. I think that's just our microcosm of the macrocosm problem. We reflect the macrocosm in our microcosmic dream world. Do you have a better answer?
I don't have a better answer. In fact, no answer, but a little comment. I many times get to hear some sermons preached on the radio and TV and different churches where you hear this thing repeatedly. God wanted us to do this. God wanted us to do that. And question comes to my mind, how did you know? Did God come and whisper in your ear or what? How do you know that? And then one preacher says this, that God wanted us to do this. Another preacher tells exactly opposite, that God wanted us to do that. So, how do we know that God created for sharing or not for sharing? That is, in Shankara's commentaries, you get a little glimpse of this, what he was telling, that since he did not create at all, how can we give a cause for something that was not actually created at all? It is like asking, why that rope created a snake. It is, you are seeing the snake, so you get, did the rope create the snake for sharing with us or what? You cannot really ask this question meaningfully.
Yeah, I like to use that analogy when I'm talking to school groups and so forth. It's sort of the ultimate philosophical loophole here when you say that the world is ultimately unreal. And as Swami Yogatmananda said, how much can you know about an unreal thing except that it's unreal? That's ultimately the most you can know about it. And if we think this rope is really a snake, we can all sit around and argue and come up with theories about what kind of snake it is and how long ago it shed its skin, and whether it's a male or a female snake. Ultimately, all those things are not going to be actual. So it just kind of goes around in circles. If you too were inspired to create the oratorio, could you please tell us about the spiritual practices you have been doing, which opened you up in order to receive the grace to create it? Well, it's a mystery to me too. Why, sometimes you wonder why God picks you to do things. If you want to think in personal terms, why you happen to be the vehicle for something. But interestingly enough, about the time I was born, my mother got interested in Vedanta teachings. So it's like that was sort of destined to be. And then she told me later that when I was very young, too young to even walk, that I would sit in my room and play records endlessly to entertain myself. And they were classical music records, and so just got into my genetic material, I think. And so it's sort of natural that both of these things would eventually combine, and I would produce classical music with the teachings of Vedanta. Now, the simple answer would be to say, well, Swami Swananda asked me to write it, so I wrote it. When I listen to this type of music, for example, Handel's Messiah or Mendelssohn's Elijah, I find the music very inspiring, and as some people have said, that music has the ability to invoke emotions beyond the level that we can get from words. And I felt, well, gee, the Christians shouldn't have all the good music. Should write some music like that that has the teachings of Vedanta. Not that there's anything wrong with the Christian teachings, but it's limited. And sometimes you listen to this lovely music and then you find out the words are all about smiting your enemies. And it feels very disappointing when you discover the message isn't all that great. So I really wanted to do that. I wanted to combine the kind of music that I found inspiring with the message that I found inspiring. How can everything be conscious if it is all an appearance? Again, the dream analogy is pretty good. Everything in your dream is coming out of your consciousness. Where else for it to come from? It's all a creation of your personal consciousness. Similarly, we can think that cosmic consciousness has dreamed up this whole universe, and for some peculiar, this is the mystery. Why do we feel separate? Why do I feel separate from you? But this is why we have spiritual practices, to get over these things. You can analyze all of our yogas in terms of this difficulty. We practice bhakti yoga to lessen our ego identification and connect with a symbol that represents a greater manifestation, a higher reality. We practice karma yoga to, again, lessen our sense of ego and increase our sense of connectedness. We practice Raja Yoga to get over the sense of constant vibrations in the mind about the external world, so that we can feel the anahata, the unstruck sound, the ultimate vibration of the universe, which is our true nature, the nature of Brahman. We practice Jnana Yoga again to train our minds to constantly keep that thought that the reality is that I am one with Brahman. So all of these yogas can be seen as ways of getting over this illusion, but consciousness, again, is this difficult word that has too many meanings. So you have to understand how we mean the word that everything is conscious. It's vibed with the spirit of Brahman, it's Shakti. Sometimes Swami Vivekananda will use the word prana, especially if he's talking in a yoga context. So these words are not completely equivalent, but they kind of all point in the same direction of this dynamic energy that infuses the universe. Detachment. How can you help someone who is destroying themselves with smoking and alcohol, etc.? Is this part of their karma? Let's see. It's a good answer. I'll probably think of a good answer when I'm not here anymore. Let's see. In some sense, you could think of addictions as us trying to grasp the reality through the apparent reality. So we see this apparent reality and we think we're going to get peace, love, and freedom through something in this world. And for example, if it's a drug or an alcohol or something of that nature, it does something to our mental processes, and it gives us this illusion that we may be freer or more expanded or something. But the difficulty is that it's like trying to grab onto a mirage. When you try to grab onto it, it seems to not be there anymore. But you think, well, I took some of that and it made me feel like I was going to get, so I'll take some more of it. And then you try again and it doesn't work again, and then you take more of it. And so there's this illusion that you're going to get it and that you're going to get closer to it. And in some sense, the world is kind of like that. The whole world's kind of addicting. And we get this idea we're going to get somewhere. And we don't. It's grasping after a mirage. There's this wonderful image in the book Alice, or is it Alice in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass? I think it's Through the Looking Glass. She's on this little boat ride, and there are these scented rushes. and she thinks they're so beautiful, and so she picks some of them and puts them in the bottom of the boat, and she doesn't notice that they disappear. She's already enticed by some more scented rushes a little further ahead, so they go further and she picks those. Oh, and then she sees some more that are really much better, and then she goes, and all of the ones she's put in the bottom of the boat are just dissolving into nothingness. And you wonder, how did Lewis Carroll have all these remarkable insights into the nature of reality? That whole scene is depicting Maya, really. She goes into this shop, and this sheep is knitting out of her own wool. Now that's almost identical to the analogy of the spider weaving its own web out of itself. So the divine energy creates the universe out of itself and then withdraws it into itself. She's creating out of her own wool. And then she takes this boat ride, and all these sensual pleasures are there, and she keeps grabbing for them, and before she even enjoys them, she's off looking for another one. And then Humpty Dumpty's sitting there, and he falls and can't be put back together again. The whole thing is, everything on the shelves also, every time she looks at the shelf, the things dissolve. As soon as she looks at them closely, they're not there anymore. I mean, it sounds like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle put into a children's story. As soon as you look closely, it's not there. It's quite interesting.
Yes, that is why Swami Vivekananda said this is Alice in Wonderland is a wonderful book. To get these very beautiful analogies that Vedanta uses, the truths that we try to understand, put in an artistic fashion, and very helpful to understand many things. The question that was asked was that how one has this self-destructing behavior, that is because, and it is universal, the degree varies, but very few people, they do exactly everything that is that they understand as right they should be doing. Many times, or most of the times, they understand that this is what I must do, but not that they actually do it. It is not that they cannot, there isn't any exact reason that why they are not doing it, but just we find all of us to a lesser or more extent, we know something is right, something that is good for me, but yet do not do it. And then when I do something that is not right, it naturally builds karma in the sense that it puts its seed, and every seed has the tendency to sprout and bring exactly similar seeds in more quantity, and thus you are now have to deal with so many seeds again and again with huge propensity to become trees. And so this behavior, in spite of a very sound reasoning to stop it, does not stop. So for that it is necessary that one takes very good, strong help to refrain, to be in certain situations, certain circumstances where one will get that help to restrain from this self-destructive behavior, that remain far away where those things could be available to you, remain in holy company where your mind will not seek those things. It will have some better things to look for, and but again one has to really strive. It is for children it is one thing, but for grown-ups it is not easy. You cannot restrain a grown-up like that. So therefore self-discipline and taking help, one should not be ashamed of taking help. One good this thing is that good way for doing it is that let me admit, yes, I need help, and then go for it. It doesn't hurt us more than otherwise what hurt may come our way. We feel a sense of shame, or our ego gets a blow when I admit that I don't do exactly all these things that are right for me to do. In fact, I do many things which destroy me. But let us admit it, and then the remedial measures can come. If I don't admit that I have an health issue, I don't go to the physician. So here as well one needs help, one should admit. Otherwise the problem goes on increasing in proportions, and more it increases, more difficult it is to control. I remember an incident, not exactly in these addiction things, but similar to the idea that a patient needed a surgery, and the doctor told that, well, not that we have to get it done today, but maybe within a month please get it done. And that man said, okay, right now I am very busy, in a month I will find out time for it. But then a month elapsed, and then the doctor reminded him, did you get to... He said, no, I was very busy, but maybe in next month, can I do it after... See, the longer you prolonging, it will be more troublesome, more expensive, and so forth, more recovery time. So get it done now, don't waste time. And the fellow still wasted time. 2 months went away, like that, 3 months. Every time doctor was telling, get it done. And after 4 months, doctor told him, no need to get it done anymore. It's not going to help now. It is there. So, I mean, while there is the possibility to stem, we should take the steps to stem it. So one should have the courage and that boldness to seek the help of the right person, the right situation to overcome these problems.
One more comment on that. How else to explain these things except that somehow it's their karma? But another issue that comes up with people that have substance abuse problems is that they don't feel good about themselves. And so they are self-destructive because of that. They simply don't like something about themselves, or they don't feel society likes them, so they don't have a good image of themselves. And so in those cases, a good strong dose of jnana yoga really helps them to get a sense of spiritual identity, that they should feel good about themselves, that they are that divine potential within them, and that they shouldn't be covering it up this way. So sometimes that approach will help people to get out of this dilemma. And the group that I help in Las Vegas is mostly made up of people that have come through the 12-step program and had a substance abuse counselor who was a devotee and did a multi-pronged approach to the recovery, where they would go to AA meetings and they would get on proper diets, and then they would study Vedanta, and then they would start devotional practices once they got that core feeling of feeling good about themselves and feeling that they were a spiritually worthy person. Because especially in the West, and Vivekananda pounded on this frequently, is that this idea that you're all sinners is very weakening. That you're somehow terrible and unworthy, and you've got all these sins pounding all over you. And so it's a very weakening standpoint, and Some people just give up. They think, well, okay, I'm terrible, so there it is. So you have to get people out of that mode of thinking and feeling that divinity within. Okay. Oh dear, string theory. What is your take on string theory, multiverses, and time travel? Well, there was an interesting comment by Stephen Hawking. He said, when it comes to predicting, astrology has more going for it than string theory. The difficulty with string theory is that it doesn't seem to be able to predict anything, so you can't really test it. That's the trouble. Now, the other trouble with string theory is that it seems more complicated than what it is we're trying to understand. So if our model is so complicated that only a few PhDs in string theory can understand it, it's not a terribly useful model. So those are the difficulties with string theory. Now that doesn't mean it's dead in the water. Eventually it may end up producing something quite interesting, and it might lead our thought process somewhere. But I haven't studied it enough to know. But those are the comments I've heard about it, that it's more complicated than what we're trying to explain, and there's no way to test it. So most scientific theories, you want to be able to make a model that fits the existing data and then see what that model then predicts, and then see if you can test that. And then if it comes out true, then you think you've got a pretty good model. And if it doesn't come out true, you try again. So that's the way it usually works. Now, what was the other thing? Multiverses. Yeah, well, there is this idea that every quantum event has all these possibilities, or at least two possibilities, and so it bifurcates. Well, that seems awfully far-fetched to me. It's an awfully crowded universe at that point. When you think of the billions and billions of trillions of uncountably, practically, number of particles that are constantly having to make a choice in a quantum realm of probabilities, just doesn't seem very likely. And again, if you're taking this apparitional model, then it's just in a world of appearance anyway. So if you're getting into multiverses, you're trying to go back to an actual model again. And this seems like a very far-fetched model to me. And then time travel, of course, in some sense, if you go fast enough in a spaceship, you can travel forward in time, but you can't travel backward. If you're traveling very fast in a spaceship and then you come back to Earth, you will not have aged as much as the people on Earth, so you can travel into the future. Doesn't do you much good, though, because you can't go backwards. For some reason, time seems to go in one direction. Perhaps that's just the nature of Maya, I don't know. But if space and time are opposites, there seems to be some necessity that time only goes in one direction. It's not a good answer, but it's the best I can do.
And time going in one direction has a plausible thermodynamic explanation. That since the events happen only in one direction, the direction of increasing entropy, and after all, time is the distance between two events. Since the events are happening only in one direction, the time also has no choice but to have to go only in one direction.
And Swami Vivekananda points out, and other spiritual teachers, that the veil of Maya is made up of time, space, and causation. Causation is one of the threads of Maya, and causation has to happen in a particular order. This has to happen before that. So it would be very difficult to see how you could have travel backwards in time, because that would violate various causation laws. It's interesting, though, that almost all the laws of physics could go in either direction when you just look at them on paper. Is it acceptable to look for the ideal in any form of creative work, not only devotional, or is it to be considered as one more loophole in continuing to enjoy more sensual things? Well, I think we have to use, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like Tai Chi, where you have to use the energy of your opponent for your advantage. As long as we're in the world of Maya and experience ourselves as a physical being with a body and mind, we're more or less stuck in this frame of mind. Even the people like Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, they only spent a certain amount of time in samadhi. The rest of the time they had to deal with the real world the way the rest of us do. And so I think it's good for us to try to see the spiritual in whatever it is we're seeing. Now, you want to be careful. You want to make sure you don't go overboard and indulge in things that are not ultimately spiritually conducive to you. And so there is a danger of sort of rationalizing sense pleasures, you could say. So that you certainly don't want to do that. But to the extent that you can, you want to try to spiritualize the things that come up in your life and the natural tendencies that you have. So if you have a tendency to like gardening, then grow flowers for worship. If you like to write music with a spiritual intent. If you like art, make artwork that has a spiritual meaning to it. If you are doing service, see that you're serving God and the other person. So there are all these things you can do with things that don't get you into big trouble. You don't want to deliberately go out and make trouble for yourself.
What Atmavidyananda hinted, that is an important point, that many times the very psychology behind asking this question is to enjoy the sense pleasure by changing the label, call them spiritual, and just keep on doing what you want to do. Just call it that, no, it is for God I am doing it. So it has to be, one has to be really very, very sincere in that I am not doing anything that is anti-spiritual life. It is, one may like something, but very idea of like is to be questioned. Why do I like it? I like it because it gives me some sense pleasures. And so now I want to have an excuse for doing it so that my conscience gets soothed. And otherwise my conscience will keep on pricking that, hey, you are not doing something spiritual. So, okay, I tell that, well, this is spiritual. Our senior Swami, who founded that center in Nagpur, he used to give example that how the mind goes, in these things, and if one is not cautious, ends up, once Swami was given the task of, you look after worship, and then especially when things are offered to Sri Ramakrishna, see that they are cooked nicely and so forth. So for that worship, rice pudding is to be made. So he thought, let me make the best rice pudding for God. So let me study how the various varieties of rice pudding are, which are best. And then, okay, this is like this, but let me take lessons from somebody. Oh, this lady makes rice pudding nicely, so let me take lessons from her. And then when the mind slipped from pudding to the lady, it is so it is very easy, to get into these things. So one has to be very cautious that is the note I wanted to sound, that's all.
Well, why did you choose the passages you did from Swamiji's writing, and how sensitive did you feel about the pairing of the tones with certain tones with them? Oh yes, that's a big topic, and I'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow night, but it's not easy summarizing 9 volumes of information down to an hour and a half. To distill that out. So what I did was I actually talked to Swami Swananda and Swami Sarvadevananda and asked them, you know, when you think of Swamiji's teachings, what are the couple of most important teachings that you think of? And then I looked at the little summary books. There's so many collections of Swamiji's teachings now that are done by topic. And so I looked at those because that would be an indication of what those people thought were the kind of the overriding topics. And so then I kind of put that all together and distilled it out and came up with a few broad areas of core ideas. And then I used the search feature in that CD-ROM and looked up various keywords or phrases about those topics, collected them on pages, and then tried to figure out which ones of these sentences could be reworked so that they will actually fit into a musical context. You know, Swamiji was famous. Some of his sentences go on and on and on and on. There's no way you can put that to music very easily. Usually for lyrics you want relatively short, catchy phrases. But he was full of those too. So you just have to sort of distill out, and sometimes I had to sort of rework them a little bit. And a lot of songs you want to rhyme. Well, he wasn't talking in rhyme, he was just extemporizing as a speaker. And so sometimes I would have to manipulate things so that that rhythmically the lines would be the same, or they might rhyme and so forth. So, and there was actually quite a bit of work to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow.
So thank you, Swamiji.
Oh, thank you.